session in a series of 4 sessions for the semester on entrepreneurship. And hopefully we're able to enhance what you're learning in the classroom by offering you speakers every couple of weeks on the topic and a variety of topics in the area of entrepreneurship. Today we have with us Dr. Utley, who is a professor at Cal State Long Beach. She teaches communication studies, so she researches, publishes, and teaches interpersonal communication skills. She's also the Associate Director of the Institute for Innovation and Entrepreneurship at Cal State Long Beach. So we are honored to have her join us today. She has quite a long breadth of experience on entrepreneurship. She's founded and co-founded a variety of organizations, and I'll let her talk to you a little bit about that and share her experience with you today. So it's a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I am happy to be here.
Yeah, and Dr. Utley, I don't know if you want to just get started now and stop sharing the screen.
Okay, let's do it. So, hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Ebony Utley. I'm a professorpreneur from CSULB. I teach communication studies. I have several businesses, and I'm the Associate Director of the Institute for Innovation and Entrepreneurship at CSULB. All right, tell me in the chat, what are your reactions to my initial introduction? First impressions of my initial introduction. Welcoming. Thank you, Jennifer. Awesome, says Kiev. Anyone else? First impressions. Impressive, says Axel. New term, professorpreneur. Nice. Thank you again. I like it myself. Professional. Expert on my topic. Okay. You all are so kind, so generous. But somebody tell me the truth. It was kind of boring, yeah? I mean, basically, I just repeated what Melissa already said about me, right? What she had already read in the bio. So yes, I appreciate you saying that it's professional, impressive, it's good. But when you're pitching, if the first thing you do in your first introduction to your audience is repeat what the audience knows about you or what they can see on the slide, then you've actually missed an opportunity, right? You've missed a key opportunity to persuade your audience. So let me try it again. Pitch number 2. 99% of pitches fail. Let me help you be the 1%. I'm Dr. Ebony Utley. I've been teaching communication skills for over 20 years. I've won pitch competitions. I've judged pitch competitions. People I've coached have won pitch competitions. I've talked myself into a plethora of opportunities, including this gig today. This workshop is going to teach you how to pitch persuasively. You'll get out of the session what you put in. So who's inspired by my pitch and ready to be their 1%? First reactions to pitch number 2. Tell me in the chat. Melissa says, I'm ready. Kimberlyn says, it's interesting. There's a good rhythm. Okay. Engaging. Motivational. Inspiring. Okay, so now tell me, what about it was attention grabbing, motivational, inspiring? What about it was more interesting than the first round? More informative. Okay, gives more information about myself. The data. The depth. Okay, my examples, right? Not only have I taught, but I'm telling you how long I've taught communication skills, that I've won competitions, I've judged them, I've helped other people win them. So I've got this like 360-degree view of what's happening in the space. So the examples, right, help make it. Maybe I had a little more energy the second time around. Also had a different introduction. I started with 99% of pitches fail. Hopefully that was an attention grabber, right? The guy like, oh snap, not, oh, okay. But if 1% are winners, like how do I become that 1%? That was my intention there, to help you get some of your attention. Okay, so better, right? Better than the first one's fine, right? Most of you agree the first one was fine, but the second one was better because it gave more information. It was more in-depth. It had data, it had examples. It was more personal. All right, third time's a charm. Here's my third introductory pitch. Nana was overworked and overwhelmed, but for every good reason. Her business was booming. Her products were in the airport. They are being distributed to diplomats by the Ministry of Tourism. She just received another fulfillment order from the island's newest five-star hotel. She wouldn't sleep all weekend packaging her organic skincare products to meet the deadline. But when was she going to prep for the pitch competition? It was 2 weeks away. She needed to win because she needed the money to scale, and that meant she needed someone to write the pitch for her, to plan the pitch deck, and help her practice. But who was going to do that? Hi, I'm Dr. Ebony Utley, the founder of the Utley Experience, and it was my storytelling that helped Nana scale. What are your reactions to pitch number 3? More relatable, okay. More detail, yes. What's significantly different about pitch number 3? Yes, it has more detail, more background, more background. What does pitch number 3 do that the other pitches don't do? Aha, good, Malia. There was a story in pitch number 3. The first was just an introduction to myself, right? The second was what I could do for you. But the third was a story that's an introduction to myself and telling you what I can do for you through my experience. And that is what makes a pitch persuasive. Giving all the information the audience needs, considering the audience's needs, but then also shaping it in a story which all audiences are familiar with. We all live and breathe stories. So let's get into my pitch deck here. Okay, so now that we've talked about the different types of pitches and what makes a pitch persuasive, which is inherently the story that you use to share with your audience, we need to talk about what's in it for us, right? Like, what is your why? If you're pitching and you're not clear why you're pitching, then your audience is not going to be clear why you're pitching. And guess what? Confused people don't buy things, and confused people don't select you to win pitch competitions. So let's start with ourselves. Tell me in the chat, why are you here today? Like, what is your why for today? Okay, Angel wants to become more multifaceted, to learn about pitching ideas. Okay. To learn how to sell myself. I want to learn to become more successful with what I know. Extra credit, I love it. And more knowledge on a subject that you're interested in, to be more educated on how to be successful, educate myself and be successful, learn about business. Okay, to learn about pitching, extra credit, to receive more information about communication, learn how to sell something. Awesome, right? So keep that why in mind as we're engaging today. And if there's ever an opportunity that I can help you achieve your why in ways that I'm not doing it, just drop in the chat and let me know, right? So that's what we're doing for today. But when you're constructing a pitch, you also want to be clear about what your why is for that particular pitch. And I'm glad your interests are so broad, because what I'm teaching you today, these persuasive speaking skills essentially, are useful for making personal introductions, for workplace requests, if you wanted a raise or a promotion or time off on your job, for managing your romantic relationships, for getting kids to bed early. These persuasive pitching skills are useful across the board. The first thing you need to do is understand what your why is. And the second thing you need to do is understand who your audience is and what it is that your audience wants, right? So after you know what you want, it's your responsibility to figure out what your audience wants. And it's called alignment. And you want to align with your audience by showing your audience that you have a lot in common with them. You want to establish your fit in your audience's world, not the other way around. It's not the audience's responsibility to come into your world. If you're trying to persuade them, it's your responsibility to create an environment that shows that you fit in their world. So yes, emphasizing similarities, things that you have in common, are great for an initial connection with someone. But for true alignment, if you want to be able to persuade someone, the other person needs to feel like you're on the same level, that you really get them, that you understand what they're going through. And that's also what I tried to convey in the pitches as they got stronger and stronger, that there are pitch competitions, there are pitch decks, there are different aspects of a pitch that needs to be constructed, especially if you're competing in a business perspective. But I wanted to create that alignment with you by showing you, hey, I've done these things. I've helped other people do these things that I know eventually you are going to want to do. I will also create alignment with you through this presentation by sharing personal stories, right? By sharing stories, by sharing examples of things that I went through, so that again, hopefully, I can start to fit in your world, not just as a professor that's talking at you about things, but someone who also wants what you want in particular situations and can help you craft the best pitch to get there. So one of the ways I like to tell audiences to focus on what the audience wants is through a WIFT, W-I-I-F-T. It's an acronym that stands for what's in it for them. Once you've identified your audience, never lose sight of your WIFT. The pitch is about you, and it's never about you, because it's really about your audience. And if you lose sight of your audience, you'll lose sight of whatever you're seeking. So here's a quick story. My nephew is 8, and he wanted me to buy him some Beyblades. This kid has 100 Beyblades. They're in like the suitcase situation. He's so many Beyblades. This is the last thing in the world. I felt like I should buy this kid. But I told him, if you can figure out what's in it for me to buy you these Beyblades, then I'll buy you some. So I explained to him how the WIFT works, whatnot. And I came back to the house the next day. Green crayon, he's written it out. He's got an entire list of a WIFT. The most impressive thing on the list, he says, Auntie, you like yoga, you like exercising and doing physical things. You pull the tail of a Beyblade, it's lots of really good exercise for your arm. And so that's what's in it for you, to get exercise. And I was like, you know what, kid, you're 8. It's fine, you won, right? Because he thought about what's in it for me. I think he also said, you like group activities, you like when people come together and do things. And if we had a Beyblades tournament, there'd be lots of people coming together to collaborate and do things. And I was like, again, you're 8, like this is pretty solid. He spent all night working on it, and y'all, I bought more Beyblades than I intended to buy, right? But that's how the WIFT works. Thinking about what's in it for your audience, because you want to persuade them. No audience is sitting around like, I can't wait till you persuade me to do something I wasn't thinking about until you got here. It's your job to figure out what that is, how to align with them, and how to establish your fit in their world and deliver something to them that they now realize because of you will benefit them. Questions? Any questions about alignment or the WIFT? You can unmute or you can drop your questions in the chat. Okay, then we'll keep going. Let's talk now about the purpose of a pitch. I like 3s. You'll see 3s throughout this presentation. Your pitch should be clear, concise, and compelling. Clear, concise, and compelling. A pitch is designed to A, help your audience organize experience. Something that you have in common. You want them to think about what you have in common in a particular way. It's your job to organize those experiences in a particular way. For whatever you're pitching, there are going to be multiple perspectives on the content of your pitch. But it's your responsibility to create what I like to call an invisible fence around what you're talking about. Sure, we're talking about persuasive pitching. We could include negotiation. We could include sympathy. We could include empathy. We could include all these other aspects in understanding a pitch. But I'm like, today, we're going to focus on storytelling, right? We're going to focus on our audience. We're going to focus on what we want first, what the audience wants second, and then we're going to focus on storytelling. I created an invisible pitch around all the things we could potentially think about. That's how you organize experience for your audience. And then it's also your job to interpret reality, to give your audience a perspective about the content of your pitch. Again, be lots of different perspectives, but what you want is to tunnel vision your audience into a particular perspective to interpret reality the way you see it. And then third, your pitch is designed to aid the audience in decision making. What do you want the audience to do after they've listened to your pitch? Do you want them to just follow up with you for more questions? Do you want them to buy something? Do you want them to invest? Do you want them to become priority partners? Do you want them to be on your side? Whatever it is, you should aid them in decision making. And at the end of your pitch, if the audience is confused and can't make a decision, then your pitch is unclear. Your pitch was probably not clear, not concise, and not compelling. The point of your pitch is to connect with your audience and show them what they need to do to make a decision in your favor. Show is the emphasis there. You want to show people what they need to do and not always tell them what they need to do. You all, many of you, I think maybe even all of you are students, right? And so you get told a lot of stuff, right? Professors be talking at you, telling you all kinds of stuff. Sometimes the information is useful, sometimes it's not so useful. But isn't the educational experience better when you get to engage, right? When maybe the professor tries something different to show you the information, maybe they write on the board, maybe they show a video, maybe they have a guest speaker come in. It lightens the information and gives you an opportunity to find a hook for yourself, some place where you like fit in, right? You're like, yes, I can see this experience organized in this way. Like I can accept this interpretation of reality. I know what's being asked of me. So you want to show instead of tell. In my first pitch, pitch A, I told you about myself. This is who I am. This is what I do. But compared to the other pitches, it was more empty. When I showed you what I could do through Nana's story by describing Nana's background and Nana's success, then you were like, oh, okay, Dr. Early, I can see how that's more in depth. That has more details. That's more interesting. If you're building a business, storytelling is one of the founder's most significant acts. They say the primary job of a CEO is to tell stories, right? Telling those stories is how you end up growing the business and making money. And if you're a terrible storyteller, then you won't be in a position of leadership very long. Again, if you're a founder of a business, the shortest distance between the founder and the funder is the story that the founder tells. So your persuasive pitch structure also has 3 parts. When you're a little kid and you're telling a story, you learn very early in life that it starts with once upon a time, and then some stuff happens in the middle, and then there's this satisfactory the end, right? Where little kids telling a story, they're just very happy to be like the end. You didn't understand anything that happened in the middle. Pitch structure is very similar to the way we learned to tell stories as a kid, except I'm going to give you new criteria for the beginning, middle, and the end. So the beginning is a normal. When things are normal, they're normal. The way they are before something changes, right? The normal is where you give your audience a reason to care about your pitch. The normal is the place where you identify characters and emotions that are going to be familiar to your audience, the way things were before something changed. The explosion is when something happens, and it doesn't have to be as dramatic as an explosion, but things are different in the explosion. Maybe good different, maybe bad different, maybe big different, maybe small different. It doesn't matter. It's just different. In the middle of every good story is an explosion. Things change. There's a happening. There's a realization. There's an event. And then on the other end of the story is the new normal. Things are different on the other side of the explosion. There's new wisdom. Maybe there's a moral of the story. Maybe there's a happily ever after. Maybe there's a call to action. Because people remember transformation, not information. Information is what you get when you just tell. One-way communication, giving the information. But if you invite your audience to participate, engage in your story, then they remember the transformation, the stuff that happened in the explosion, the stuff that shifted the normal into a new normal. So I just mentioned emotions and characters. So let's talk now about pitch elements and where they belong. So every story needs an identifiable character. And once upon a time, we used to think of this character as a hero. If you're familiar with the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell, it's basically every movie you've ever seen. The hero is like, hey, you know, I'm a reluctant hero. They get a call to do something and they don't want to do it. So they're like, I'm not going to go. And then something forces them out into the wilderness and they have to do this thing and they're unprepared for it and they almost die. It's terrible. But then someone comes to help them. And with the help, they're successful. And if it's a male character, he meets a girl and falls in love and then kills the bad guys. And at the end, they live happily ever after, right? That's my tripartite version of the hero's journey. Hero's journey is fine, right? But we've matured beyond the hero's journey when it comes to storytelling to know that we don't have to have a hero to tell a good story. We just really need an identifiable character, someone that we care about, someone that we can connect to. And in most pitchers, that storyteller is you, right? You're the one that's telling the story. If you want to persuade someone, the identifiable character is you. And sometimes there are multiple identifiable characters. Sometimes the character might not be you, but it might be someone that you've helped. So for example, in my third pitch, Nana was the identifiable character as having all this success in her business, but I was also the identifiable character that came in to help her out. Your characters, to be real, must have an authentic emotion. And again, it doesn't have to be like high drama emotion. It can be something as simple as they were frustrated, or they were excited, or they were overwhelmed, or they were experiencing wonder, or they were curious. So it doesn't matter what the authentic emotion is, but it has to be there. And your emotion is not what the audience is supposed to feel, but the emotion is what the character is experiencing. The emotions are felt by the character or inherent in the circumstances of the story. And it's through the emotion that the story receiver experiences empathy with the story. And then we have a significant moment. For a story to be compelling, it should include a specific moment in time or physical space where you talk about the environment that you're in. And then next, we have specific details. Specific, descriptive, it helps if they're unexpected details or unexpected imagery that's relevant to the audience and draws the listeners into the world. The details are such that people, wait, what? They did what? And they went where? And what color was it? And what time of day? And sometimes with these specific details, you might not remember the big picture of the story, but the specific detail that stands out is significant for your audience to remember you and what you were talking about. Enough so to be like, yo, find me that person that told the story about X, or find me the person that told the story that had an environment that was described by Y. The specific detail is an opportunity to, again, invite your listeners into your world. And so the finer the detail, the better. Okay, any questions about those pitch elements or about the pitch structure? You can unmute or drop them in the
Yes,
chat.
I have a question. This is Victoria.
Mhm.
You mentioned earlier under pitch purpose, organizing experience. I didn't catch all what you said about something about the audience.
Let's see, organizing experience. So as the pitcher, it's your responsibility to create an invisible fence around what's going to be important to the audience. So the example I gave is when I'm organizing this experience for this presentation, we could talk about negotiation, we could talk about empathy, we could talk about sympathy, we could talk about digital communication strategies, we could talk about all these things. But I want to focus. I want to organize the experience around stories. I want to focus you all into identifying what you want, identifying what your audience wants, and telling a story to bridge the gap. That's me creating an invisible fence around all these other things that we could potentially talk about. That's what I mean by organizing experience. Is that helpful?
Yes, thank you.
Anyone else? Questions? Comments so far? Okay. So remember how I said that identifiable character is probably going to be you. This is where we're focusing on you, right? Whatever it is that you want to pitch, you want to ask your professor for extra credit, you want to ask the bank for a loan, you want to ask for time off at your job. This is the personal pitch, right? Where you get an opportunity to represent yourself to the audience who's receiving your pitch. Key questions. Who are you, right? What is your why? A personal pitch is an opportunity to humanize yourself, to increase other people's faith in your confidence, to increase other people's faith and confidence in your abilities. Can you do what you say you're going to do? What have you been through? What brings you to this particular opportunity? How do you want your audience to feel about you after your story? Got a little typo here. I'll fix that before I send these to you, right? Especially if you're pitching your business, especially if it's an early stage business. Let's say you're pre-revenue, right? Let's say you're at the ideation stage, you're just getting started. Sure, you can put up a slide with some financial projections, but it doesn't mean anything because you haven't made any money yet. So what is the audience evaluating you on? They're evaluating you on you. When I'm investing, I like to say that for early stage companies, the 3 criteria that are most important are the founder, and the founder. Who are you? Can you build this thing? Can you lead a team? What have you done previously that suggests that you can build this business right now? Do you understand the market? Are your team members loyal to you? Do you trust each other? Are you an inspiring human being? All of that can be conveyed in a 30-second story at the end of the day if you've structured the story appropriately, included the pitch elements, and then follow the shape of the story. Okay, so I want to give you another pitch. I think that I will stop sharing here so you can see me. And I'll give you an example. So after I give you this other pitch, a personal story from myself, I want you to tell me in the chat what your first reactions are, right? Without filtering, just first reactions. Okay. I was standing out the window, looking out on the street that had been my Long Beach home for the last 7 years. I love that block, but I also wanted to leave it. Too many people, too many parties, too many drive-bys. I wanted a nice, quiet street in a house that I owned. I was tired of renting and fighting with my landlord to fix the leak in the roof, get the rats out of the walls, and clean the mold out of the attic. I wanted better for myself. That's why I put in an offer on the house. That's why my savings were sitting in that escrow account. I never thought I'd be able to buy a house by myself in Long Beach, and it was happening. Okay, yeah, it was still in a hood, but it was a slightly better upgrade. I wanted that house. And I also wanted to build my business. My first education technology product was in development. I had a sexy product. I had a team. I had traction. What I didn't have was that money sitting in an escrow account for my house. I turned from the window and I looked at my boyfriend and I said, I'm going to do it. Do what? He asked. Bet on myself. I'm pulling that money out of escrow. I'm choosing my business. There will be other houses. And that decision was my biggest risk as an entrepreneur. Okay, in the chat, first impressions of my story. Okay, Victoria says, what was the point? Leticia says, I want to know more. Okay, other first reactions? Don't keep us hanging. What happened? What's the next move? Seems like it's hard to find a work-life balance. Yeah, that can also be true. Okay. What's the next move? All right, well, I got you on the hook, right? It seems like I got your attention. Let's go back and figure out how that happened, right? So someone, you can also unmute yourselves. You can unmute or tell me in the chat, what's the normal? In that story, what was the normal? The normal is that you would be conservative and buy a property and not risk at all. Okay.
I thought the normal was living in an apartment.
Okay. Living in an apartment. Yeah. I like threes. Anyone else? Looking out of the same window for years, right? Wanting something better for yourself, right? So the normal was living in that apartment that I was renting, right? That was the normal. And then what's the explosion? What happens in the middle? Good, Letitia, making the decision to buy the house. That's going to make things different. Making the decision to buy the house. Anything else in the middle, in the explosion? The explosion kind of has two parts in this story. Yes, right? So making a decision to buy the house, because that's going to change my normal, but then making the decision to take the risk, to take the money out of escrow and build a business. That's the other decision. And then the new normal that I kind of left you hanging on. I admit that. But what does it look like the new normal is going to be? We take the risk. We make the decision to buy the house. We take the risk, make the decision not to buy the house. Then what's on the other side? Hopefully a successful business. Yes. Embracing this big risk as an entrepreneur. And so what does that tell you about me as an entrepreneur? I'll put the slides up here to guide this conversation. Okay, these are the things a personal pitch is supposed to do. What does it tell you about me just from that story? That I'm determined, okay? That I'm a risk taker, right? What else does it tell you about me? That I bet on myself, right? Maybe my self-confidence is high. I'm willing to take a risk to get what I want. Now, imagine that you were an investor listening to my story. Would you want to invest in someone who is a risk taker, someone who is determined, someone who bet on themselves? Probably so, right? Wanting better for yourself. If you were looking for a business partner to help you build your business and they told you this story, would you want to work with someone who was confident in themselves, willing to take risks? Someone who is determined? Probably so, right? And if you're building a business where you just can't sustain any risk whatsoever, then you probably don't want to work with someone who embraces such risk. You'd be like, oh no, I can't take risks in this business at all. It's not that type of business. Then listening to my story, you'd be like, nope, that's probably not someone I want in my business. But either way, it can help you make a decision because the story told you something about me without me saying to you, I am a person that takes a lot of risks. I could say that to you, but it doesn't have any support, right? I'm not backing it up. I'm like, I've been through hard times and I came out great on the other side. So what? That's my opinion of me. That doesn't tell you anything. If you want to be persuasive, give people details, give them the depth, give them the examples to make the proper decision. So someone asked earlier, what was the point, right? The point of the story was for me to convey to an investor audience that, hey, You want to take on risk. You want to take a risk with me because I take risks with myself. I'm willing to bet it all to move forward. I'm going to do whatever it takes to make this business a success. Angel's asking if I had a contingency plan in case of failure. Well, Angel, in the moment when I turned away from that window, I did not have a contingency plan. It became increasingly clear that I needed to build one over time, and that is, in fact, another story. All right, so let's walk through our pitch elements. Same story, yes? Again, unmute, tell me in the chat, who's the identifiable character? Me. Yes,
Yeah.
good. I'm
You and your boyfriend.
Me and my boyfriend. Yes, right? Also, maybe it tells you that I can do committed relationships because I mentioned a boyfriend. Didn't have to. Could have said it was just a friend. Could have said I was talking to my mom, but that was an extra trying to add that in there. What was the authentic emotion? Frustration. Good, Letitia, especially in the beginning. Frustration for the authentic emotion. And what's the authentic emotion towards the end? In the new normal, when I've made my decision. Determination. Good, Leah. Maybe excitement, anticipation for what's coming next, confidence. Good. And what was the significant moment? Specific moment in time or a physical space. What was the significant moment in the story? This one might not be as easy.
Would it be wanting to take out the money? Yeah, that's what she said.
Yeah, taking out the money is more of the explosion than the significant moment. Usually the significant moment is tied to a physical space or a moment in time. So the significant moment in this story was supposed to be the window, right? Because the window kept coming back. I was looking out the window at the block, and then I turned away from the window, turning away from the block to make this other decision. So the significant moment was supposed to be standing at the window. I feel like that could be tighter in my story. Room for improvement. Specific details. Do you remember any specific details? It's been a few minutes since I finished the story. What stays in your memory? Any specific details? Unexpected details or imagery?
The window.
The window, but if we put the window at the significant moment, were there other specific details? Okay, maybe when I said I'm doing it. Okay, Michelle, the way I described the neighborhood, yes, Malia, fighting with the landlord. And there's one other unexpected thing that I dropped in there that I'm hoping someone picked up on. Yes, good, Jennifer, the rats. I legit had rats in my walls. It sounded like they were bowling at night. But that was a specific, unexpected detail that was supposed to make the audience go, oh, I know those kinds of Long Beach apartments, right? Or say, oh my God, like that's a terrible environment. Of course, she had to do something different. If it wasn't getting a new house, then it was building the business so she could make more money to move on and not live under those circumstances anymore, right? So hopefully those things were pretty easy for you to identify, right? Because the story has easily identifiable characters, authentic emotions. I confess, significant moment could be stronger. I'll work on it. But the specific details of the rats fighting with the landlord, mold in the attic, like these kinds of things, I'm like, oh, right? This is a situation that demands an explosion, that demands something to be different. So there could be a new normal. Okay. Any other questions about the purpose of a pitch, about these elements of a pitch when you're telling a story, about your personal pitch? We're going to shift gears a little bit. Everybody good? Okay. So let's talk now about the style of your pitch. When you're pitching, it's very important to be sensitive to your audience. So avoid words or expressions that might insult, anger, demean, or devalue your audience, and avoid cliche. Simplicity. Simple, succinct, and shareable. I told you I like threes, right? So you want your story to be simple, succinct, and shareable. Clear, concise, and compelling. The simpler, the better. Avoid jargon. A lot of people hear jargon, right? Like when you use ChatGPT to write your pitches, most people think is, this person isn't really sure what they want to do. They're not really confident in what they're building. They can't even use their own words. They're just using industry buzzwords that don't mean anything. Like, our product will make your life better. What does that mean? Make my life better. Like how? Like what exactly are you going to do? We are the new improved version of insert technology here. New and improved how? New compared to what? Improved compared to what, right? Like we outsell our competitors on the market. Okay, by how much? Like these are empty phrases that don't tell your audience anything. And so if you're not showing your audience how to organize the experience, they're just going to be turned off and be like, I don't know what this person is talking about. They're not saying anything I haven't heard before. But when you use comparison, when you compare two unlike things in a figure of speech, when you use metaphors or similes, people are like, oh, okay. We're the Airbnb for cars. Oh, okay. Right? Turo. Right? Most people understand what that is. Oh, okay. We know what Airbnb is. Okay. Were you doing that for cars? Oh, that sounds interesting. Right? Or we're the Starbucks for non-alcoholic wines. We're like, oh, okay. Fast versions of non-alcoholic wine. Okay. It gives people a point of reference. So sometimes though, you want to be careful about making comparisons because then people remember, oh, well, I could just get the original thing that seems much better than what it is that you're building. So when you can do an unexpected comparison, then that's more persuasive to your audience than if you're doing a common comparison, right? But anytime you can compare, anytime you can use a metaphor, it could help your audience understand. So when I said I was creating an invisible fence and doing this thing non-verbally with my hands as a fence, but talking about a fence as a way to create boundaries around what you're talking about, hopefully that comparison metaphor was more persuasive for you, helps you understand what I was talking about a little bit better. Repetition is good. 3 is a magic memory number. That's why I use it all the time, right? People generally, when it's 4 or more, they're only going to remember 3 if they remember the 3. If your repetition is alliteration, clear, concise, and compelling, simple, succinct, and shareable, your audience is more likely to remember what it is that you said. If nothing else, I'm like, man, it had like 3 S's. The other one had 3 C's, and then people will tick in their mind and they get 1 S, another S, and a third S will eventually help them to remember. So alliteration, of course, is the repetition of initial consonants. So Sally sells seashells by the seashore, right? But anaphora is repetition of a word or phrase at the beginning of successive sentences. And sometimes this can help trigger people's memories as well, because you want your audience to remember what you're talking about when you're not there, because you want to persuade them to buy your product or reach out to you later or make an investment. So here's an example from Winston Churchill. We shall not flag or fail. We shall not go on to the end. We shall fight in France. So the we shall is an example of anaphora, repetition of a word, right? So if alliteration is repetition of a letter, then anaphora is repetition of a word. And epiphora is repetition of a word or phrase at the end of a clause or a sentence. So here's a quote from the Bible, 1 Corinthians 13:11. When I was a child, I spoke as a child, but when I became a man, I put away childish things. So the repetition of child at the end of each phrase is epiphora. And the last one is anadiplosis. This is repetition of the last word of one clause at the beginning of the following clause. This is getting sexier here. So here's my quote from Howard Griffin, Black Like Me. The laughter had to be gross or it would turn to sobs. And to sob would be to realize. And to realize would be to despair. See what he did there, right? So sobs and sob, realize, realize. Anadiplosis. This is the rhetorician in me, I can't help it. But when you use these stylistic devices, again, if you're speaking from memory, it helps you remember because you're like, okay, I got 3 S's, I got this word, I got to repeat 3 times. And it also helps your audience remember. And the more your audience remembers, the better. The 5th example here is engagement. That just means don't be boring. My number 1 rule when I'm talking is don't bore myself. So you've got vocalics to help you. You can increase your volume, you can decrease your volume, you can speed up, you can talk more slowly, you can use silence as an opportunity to reset and get your audience's attention. Your tone, your pitch, all of it can be variable. I had a student, I'm coaching him on his story. He had a really great story, but he told the whole story like this, and it doesn't matter what happened. He did everything in monotone over and over and over again, and he was saying something really exciting, but we couldn't tell it was exciting because it occurred just like this. And I was like, come on, you know your story. Tell me like you're telling a friend in a conversation. Use your natural nonverbals, use your hand if you need to. Increase your volume, lower your volume, shift your tone, shift your pitch, draw us in with the way you're speaking. That kind of engagement in your vocalics can make a world of difference when you're pitching. If someone's attention wanders off, just the sound of your voice changing might be enough to bring them back. Like, oh, wait, what did I miss? Something happened. Because when you're pitching, your number 1 job is to be more interesting than your audience's cell phone. Because y'all know what it is, right? 8 to 10 seconds, you're like, oh, what is talking? And then next thing you know, you're on your phone, not paying attention anymore. So you've got to keep folks off their phone and engaged with you for as long as possible. So vocalics is one strategy for engagement. Another strategy is I-we language, right? I takes responsibility, helps you create a collaborative climate, right? And we suggest that you're bringing in other people into that climate. Sometimes I hear people pitch and they'll ask questions like, what do you think I did? I'm like, I don't know. You're supposed to tell me. Like, you're the one that's pitching. So that is not a good engagement strategy to fish or ask your audience to guess what you're thinking. Most audience members will find it very annoying and will be on their phone instead. It's your responsibility to draw them in. If you want to create that collective, then use the we language. Because most people are like, we, I don't know if oh no, I guess I do feel that way, right? Or if you want to parse out your audience really quickly and see who's we on your side and who's we not necessarily interested, use we language and those lines will be drawn really quickly. Like, okay, these folks are not my target audience, but these folks over here, they are my target audience because I can see in their nonverbals, they're invested in the we. And 6 is strategy. Your first sentence should get everyone's attention. So many people waste their first sentence on, hi, my name is Dr. Utley. It was on the slide. There was an introduction, like everybody knows what your name is. Give me something interesting to capture my attention. Now that I care, then tell me who you are. Like once you get finished with your initial story or your initial introduction, start with a story, then say, like I did in my earlier pitches, hi, I'm Dr. Utley, and I'm here to explain to you how I'm doing X, Y, and Z. Your first sentence should be your power sentence. And there should be a callback in that sentence, something that you refer back to when you get to the end of your story. Because again, humans like completion, and we talked about normals and new normals. So if you start with a phrase, I think in my second pitch, I started with 99% of pitches failed. Let me help you be the 1%. Who's ready to get started and become that 1%? Brings us back. It's the callback, right? That brings us back at the end to where we were in the beginning. But it's not quite the same because we started with a normal and there was the explosion and then we ended with the new normal. So ask yourself, is there a word? Is there a theme? Is there a situation that I can mention in the beginning of my story that I can bring back to the end of my story? And some of you might be wondering, Dr. Utley, how many stories are you talking about here in a pitch? The answer is however many you need to be successful. Now, we generally think of pitches as starting with an opening story to get everybody's attention, to let them know what the problem is and the solution that you're building, right? By using the strategy, Here's the normal with the problem. Here's the explosion. This is the thing that I'm building. This is my solution. And then the new normal is how everyone's lives are going to be different because of what I was building that I introduced in the middle. So yeah, maybe you have a 30-second introduction with your callback. Then maybe you are talking about customers who successfully used your product, and you have another story about those potential customers still following the formula. Maybe you tell a story about how you united with your team or how you found each other and built this thing together, and that's another story. So you'll tell as many stories as you need within your 30-second pitch, your 3-minute pitch, your 5-minute pitch, etc. So another question you might be asking is, Dr. Lee, I'm a terrible storyteller. Like, I don't think I have stories, as many stories as you're talking about how I could potentially use in a pitch. And my answer is, yes, you do. Any experience can be turned into a story following the formula that we talked about today. So first, you could think about nouns. You could make a list: people, places, things, or events, or you could scroll through the photo gallery on your phone. And as you come across each of these nouns, allow some mental space for the memories to come back. The stories that were connected to those pictures, or the stories that are connected to those names, right? Let's say you just make a list of all your children or your closest friends, and then just spend some time like staring at their name and think about the best memory that you had with that person. Guarantee you there's a story there. Every photo that you've taken on your phone, I guarantee you there's a story there. Why did you take the photo in the first place? Did you take it for you? Did you take it to share with someone else? Did you take it because you thought it was really beautiful? What were you doing when you took it? Now, are those stories going to become the stories in your pitch? Maybe. But if nothing else, it's practice for you finding and identifying and telling stories. And you might be surprised how something simple as a photo you took in 2016 might actually end up part of a pitch for something that you're telling in the future. You can also ask a bunch of questions, right? You can record yourself answering them. You can write them down on paper. You can type them. But you might ask yourself questions like, well, who is my ideal customer? Who am I trying to persuade? Why do they need my opportunity? How will they feel after experiencing my opportunity? Why do they need my opportunity and not someone else's opportunity? And then after you answer those questions, then you can turn it into a story. Okay, well, someone needs my opportunity because it will help them improve their communication with their children. And if they improve their communication with their children, then they might have more regular schedules and more peaceful interactions in their home. So can I tell a story about a hypothetical person that uses my opportunity to have these more peaceful interactions in the home? Yes, yes, you can. But it all started from that initial question. And then third, consider prompts. I never thought I'd be able to. I always wanted to. One day I will. When I was growing up, my insert your impactful person here, brother, sister, auntie, mother, grandmother, teacher, boss, whatever. They taught you something. They encouraged you to do something. They gave you good advice. If you're thinking about your customers, you can say customer A and customer B tried my opportunity and fill in the blank, right? With how your opportunity made something incredibly different for them. All right. Questions about style, questions about pitch discovery. Questions, comments, unmute, or tell me in the chat.
This is Victoria. Going back to pitch style,
Mhm.
under simplicity, you mentioned 3 things that were starting with the letter S. Can you remember what those were?
Yes, I see. I love that you remember that there were 3 and they all started with S. Simple, succinct, and shareable.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Okay, so let's shift our gears again and talk about pitch preparation. Not being facetious here. The best thing you can do to prepare for your pitch is practice, 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 practice. I encourage you to write your pitch word for word, verbatim. Not so that you can memorize it, but so that you can know it, right? If all the words are on the page, you're going to know what comes next. And even if it doesn't come out exactly the way it was on the page when you're pitching, that's fine. But you've wrapped your head around the entire idea. and you know exactly how long it's going to take for you to share said idea. When I run pitches on Zoom and I tell people they have 3 minutes, at 3 minutes and 30 seconds, I put you on mute. People are just still talking and they don't know that I put them on mute until I start talking, right? And then they're disappointed. I'm like, yeah, but when you enter this pitch competition, I told you had 3 minutes. I told you at the beginning of the competition, you'd have a 30-second grace period, and that's it. So if people don't get to the good part, if they don't get to the new normal because you ran out of time, that's your fault. The best way to make sure that doesn't happen is to practice, to write it down, know exactly how many minutes it takes. Sometimes I'll give presentations and people will say, you have X minutes left. I'm like, no. I know exactly how many minutes I have left because I practice and practice and practice and practice. The biggest pitch mistake is rambling and going over time. Know exactly how long it's going to take you to pitch, be time conscious, and take as little time as possible. Just because you have 5 minutes to pitch doesn't mean that you need all 5 minutes, right? Maybe you do, but if you don't, that's okay. Say what you got to say. Succinct, simple, shareable, and then be finished. Leave more time for Q&A that allows you to go more in depth about the questions that your audience specifically has. I will always leave more time for Q&A than talking into the last minute because, again, it's a whiff. What's in it for the audience? They get to tell me what's in it for them in Q&A, and I can respond specifically to their needs by leaving more time for Q&A. So be clear, concise, and compelling. Use your Q&A. When you're practicing, practice out loud. You don't know how long your pitch is going to be if you read it silently to yourself. You have to say the words out loud. The number one way to improve your delivery when you're pitching is just to slow down, because a lot of times we're just speaking too fast. Right? I get that feedback all the time. I'm hoping I'm working at a good pace today. Right? Record yourself, listen to your recording. Watch yourself. Record yourself, put the volume on mute and watch yourself. Do you have any annoying habits? We all have them. They don't look natural and they seem distracting, then work on eliminating them, right? Then play your recording, listen to it, but don't watch. Go some other place in the room, let your recording play, listen to your voice. Is your voice engaging? Are you doing that monotone thing that makes people not want to hear what you have to say? What parts do you listen to your own voice and like, oh, that sounds really good? Or, oh, no, that's not how that's supposed to go. I should pause more here. I should speak more quickly here. Also, don't be afraid to get feedback from people that want you to succeed and have your highest good in mind. Practice in front of them. See what their reactions are. When you practice in front of them, do they pick up their phone? If they do, it's your fault. You weren't as engaging as you could be. What could you do differently to be more engaging? Take their notes. Take their constructive feedback. Take notes when you're just listening to yourself. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but we practice to be natural. The more we practice, the more natural the experience of pitching becomes. Those who are great pitchers, right, are people who've been practicing it. Now, you don't have to have been doing it for 20 years to have a ton of practice, but you could practice repeatedly when you have a handful of opportunities. And here's the final thing. Pitch to a friend. Very short pitch, right? 30 seconds, 2 minutes. Pitch to a friend. Ask your friend to pitch to someone else. Then ask that friend to pitch to one more person, and then ask the third person to pitch it back to you. If it doesn't come back to you kind of sort of close to what you started with, then you are unclear. And again, that's not you. I have a friend who has excellent ideas all the time. She describes them to me, and I try to describe to someone else, and I butcher it every single time, right? Maybe I should take some responsibility for that, but the majority is my friend. Her ideas are just not quite as clear as they should be because they're new. Like sometimes the idea is not clear to you because you just got it and you need to interact with other people to make it tighter, right? So I gave her this feedback. She was like, okay. She described it to me again. I was like, aha, I got it this time. It's much clearer. I was able to describe it to someone else. I do the same thing when I'm working on phrases, like the same friend. I was just reading her phrases out loud. She's packing or doing something, like not paying much attention to me. She's doing her own thing. I'm reading phrases. Nothing is happening. She's still doing the thing. I read a phrase and she stops. I said, aha, I got it, right? She stopped what she was doing and said, wait, read that again, right? That's how I knew that I had come up with something that was clear. So sometimes you just need another person in the room to help you prepare your pitch, to give you some feedback about what they find interesting, what they find satisfactory. So what else can you do to prepare yourself? So you got to get your mind right, got to get your body right, got to get your technology right. My first pro tip is always be early so you can show up on time. Especially if you're in the Los Angeles area and you got to drive someplace to pitch. We just never know what's going to happen with traffic. You don't want to be anxious. You don't want to be sweaty. You don't want to be looking for parking and like dodging to the place you got to be to pitch, right? Even when we're on the Zoom, right? Yes, you can log in almost instantaneously, but you don't want to be dashing through the house, making sure you're in something presentable on Zoom and then sit down like all huffing and puffing and be like, okay, I'm here, right? Log in early, test your screen share if you need to, get some time comfortable in the chair you're sitting in, make sure the background behind you is ready to rock and presentable for an audience. Just let your mind be clear so you're not worrying about the details. When your mind is clear, you can focus on who you are and what your pitch needs to accomplish, both for you and for your audience. If you're pitching on Zoom, pull away from screens a few minutes before your pitch. Like literally, rest your eyes, close them, calm your mind, maybe do a few meditation things, do any routines that ground you, take some deep breath, rub the tips of your fingers together. Sometimes I like to clap to pull the energy between my hands. Whatever you need to do to just calm your mind, get yourself in the zone, like, okay, now I'm ready to present. When it comes to your body, never underestimate the importance of a first impression. Dress to match your brand. It used to be back in the day, like, oh, you need to dress business professional. We don't really need to do that anymore. Like, dress in a way that matches your brand. If you're a cleaning service, I would not expect to see you in a suit, right? If you're in a tech service, I mean, maybe you're in a polo, maybe you're in a button up, like, I don't know, but I would expect like tech vibes. I probably also wouldn't expect to see you in a suit. If there's a particular color that represents your brand, like try to wear that color, but also dress in a way that makes you feel comfortable and confident. You don't want to look like you're playing dress up when you're giving a pitch. You want to look like I'm comfortable in these clothes, I'm comfortable in my skin, and I am ready to do the thing, okay? If you're online, still dress to match your brand, but something with a higher neckline that will translate online. We also want to set the camera so you don't look like you're just a floating head. I know you've seen that, folks. There's like just the head in the screen. You're like, do they have a neck? It's weird. So you adjust your camera. There you go. Adjust your camera so you can see that your person has shoulders, right? And they're dressed appropriately. Sometimes be careful with patterns, be careful with white. Doesn't always translate well for everyone online, especially if someone who is colorblind. If you can stand up or sit upright. Secret here, I'm sitting on a pillow that like props me up in this chair so that I can stay in a proper posture when I'm on the screen. Whatever it is you need, do that. Also, we talked about vocalics and the power of your voice, especially when you're pitching online when people can't see your full body. Try some tongue twisters. We just talked about Sally selling seashells by the seashore. Another favorite one for me is my mama made me make my messy bed. I practiced it right before this pitch to warm up your mouth, right? If we are doing a physical exercise or running a marathon, we're going to stretch first. So you should do the same thing with your vocalics. Practice doing vocal warm-ups. And then finally, when it comes to your technology, if you're in person and you can, bring your own tech because you're comfortable with your laptop. Bring your dongles, right? Use your own presentation if you can. If you can't, have backup plans for backup plans. Make sure it's in the cloud. Maybe even go old school and bring a flash drive just in case something happens with their technology if you can't use your own. Or be prepared to pitch without your slides because you're like, it doesn't matter what's happening in this space. Like I can handle it. I can give this presentation without it. If you're online, make sure that your laptop or your computer is fully charged and is plugged in. Again, before this talk, I was almost on E. I was like, oh, snap, I got to plug this in now. I don't want to be mid-presentation looking on the floor for my chargers to plug them in. We talked about making sure how your background is plain, acceptable, or maybe a bookcase or a good piece of art that you don't mind showing people. If you're going to blur your background, make sure it works with the clothes that you're wearing and the style of your hair. You don't want to be disappearing in and out of your background during your pitch because that's distracting. Minimize distractions in your environment. Tell people that you're living with, yo, I'm about to do this pitch. Y'all need to be quiet for like 5 minutes and make sure they know what the stakes are and how important it is. If you've got bells and whistles in your presentation, make sure your video is going to play. Make sure that you have natural light as much as possible. I tested my light before I got on to make sure you can see me well. Make sure that you're not backlit. You don't want your light behind you. You want your light in front of you or to the side so that we can see your face. I judged a pitch competition once where the pitcher was in darkness the entire time. I couldn't see his face at all. And so even though he was saying great things, it was super weird not to be able to see him. So consider those things also when you're giving your pitch. All right, any questions about any of that, about pitch delivery and pitch preparation? These are 3 references that I really like. Again, it's the professor and me. I have to give you sources for some of this content. I love the 3-minute rule. I love stories that stick, and also flip the script when it comes to persuasive pitching. And I will make sure that you have access to this deck through Dr. Galvez. And now I think that I've left a little time for Q&A. Dr. Galvez, I don't know how much time you need for your announcements and such, but this brings us to the end of the persuasive pitching presentation. I hope that it has been helpful for you. And again, any questions and comments, I will take them now in the chat, or feel free to unmute yourselves.
We only need like 5 minutes at the end, just to remind them of the next session.
Okay.
Okay, could you go back to the previous slide where you listed the references?
There you go.
Thank you.
I always told you all it was best to leave time at the end for Q&A. So I've got 10 minutes for Q&A. What can I tell you that's specific to your situations or specific to a business idea that you have that might be helpful? And if you don't want to unmute or type in the chat, you can always send a direct message to Dr. Galvez and she could ask the question for the group, whatever works for you. And also, if you have any feedback from me, I'm always trying to improve my persuasive pitching presentation skills. If there was anything that was unclear to you or not persuasive, you can also let me know that as well.
I have a question.
Yes.
So let's say I have my product, I haven't fully developed it. Let's say it's like a fake product that I'm gonna have to present that. I will still use the same guidelines and the same instructions that you told us in the presentation, even just as if it were a real product, I guess. And I can make it like that completely. I mean, comparing a persuasive like that, even if it's not a real product yet.
Okay, Lizette, you're a little bit muffled. I think you are asking me if you've got an idea for a product, but it's not a real product yet, if you could still reference it in a persuasive pitch?
And yeah, and I can use all of what you taught us, like, I guess I can use all the guidelines to make it sound as if it is real. I can still use this persuasion technique, but it's just not a real product, but that will be okay for a presentation, I guess.
If I'm understanding you correctly, yes, as long as you're transparent about it not being in existence yet.
Oh, okay. So what would you like? My product, for example, is a heatless straightener, a straightener that doesn't use heat. I haven't developed that product yet, so how will I be transparent in that sense?
Dr. Galvez, can you hear a little better than I can? Lizette, would you mind, are you in a position where you can also type in the chat?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry, we just couldn't hear you as clearly as I'd like to.
Okay, can you put on the last slide again where you had your contact information?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. How would you show transparency in a product that hasn't been developed yet? Maybe I would tell a story with identifiable characters about the product, and then say, at the end, I would say something like, and it would change their lives, except it hasn't been developed yet. But let me tell you what my plans are to make it real, right? Something like, I don't know, Brenda and Ebony have been looking for an opportunity to increase enrollment in their classes, and they came to me and they asked me if I had any ideas, and I told them, I think I do have an idea to increase enrollment in your classes. What you need is a technology product that will allow you to do X, Y, and Z. And Brenda and Ebony were so excited. They told me that they would give me the money for it tomorrow if I could deliver it by the end of the week. Unfortunately, that's not going to be possible, but I am building it. And let me tell you what it looks like. And then I'd use that as a transition to go into the next thing, right? So that's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it could be, I personally hate when pitchers ask me to imagine, because I'm just like, oh, you're asking me to imagine, it's your idea. Can you tell me what it is that you want me to build, that you're building? But since you haven't built it, you might ask the audience, imagine if there were a way to do X, Y, and Z. Actually, I've been imagining it too. Let me show you what it looks like, right? And then you walk through the steps of this thing that you've been imagining that isn't real yet, and everyone knows that from the beginning, but they know that you're working on it. So those are two storytelling strategies that you could use to get that across.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And thank you for typing. Anyone else? Anything else? Okay. What would be a great way to put yourself out there as a notary? Well, Jacqueline, tell me who your audience is. Who do you want to primarily serve? Because whenever we think about pitching, we've got to think about who the audience is, because depending on the audience, our strategies will shift. And in the meantime, I can put the Pres link in the chat here. Banks, hospitals, etc. Okay, so you want to go a business to business route. I might, well, if you have a website, the first thing I would do is on the website, be very clear from a storytelling perspective about who you could serve, right? So I might identify an individual at a bank or an individual that you regularly use as a bank that needs XY services and say, I can support that person. Also at hospitals, when you're identifying who the decision makers are, when there is a notary, maybe it's I don't know much about hospitals, maybe it's a head nurse that makes decisions about notary things. This person is responsible for admin. Then you can tell a story about that person whose admin job becomes even easier because they know they can call on you and they don't have to search around and find other people. Think about your explosion. What is it that you offer as a notary that makes your business different, more effective, more simplified, more efficient than other businesses? And then tell a story. It's like, have you ever been looking for a notary and not known where to go? Once so-and-so, your identifiable character, found my business that allows people to do X, Y, and Z. It was so much easier for them to get their notary services done in the future. I think when I go to a notary, I go to the UPS store. It's the first thing that comes to mind, right? But why should someone go to you instead of a UPS store? Right? So if your normal is going to a UPS store, what happens if they go to you instead? And then how is their life different, more efficient, etc. on the other end of that? Justin, this is a really big question. What's the best way to get in the sports market? I mean, I'd even ask you which aspect of the sports market. There's just so much there. But the first thing would be, again, identifying the audience. Like, who do you feel like you need to talk to? And sometimes we use our persuasive pitching skills to to identify the best audience. When you're a student, people are happy to talk to you. People do anything for students. Once you're not a student anymore, nobody cares, right? So take advantage of being a student. And let's say there's someone in the sports industry, you just email them. It's worth a shot, right? Like maybe you're connected by 2 or 3 degrees on LinkedIn. Maybe you're not. You just found this person and they work for someone in the sports industry. And you're just like, hi, I'm so-and-so. I'm a student. Make yourself the identifiable character, a brief story. I've played sports my entire life. I'm in college now and I'm looking for an opportunity to continue engage in the sports world. Would you be willing to give me 10 minutes of your time to talk about how you got to where you are in your career? Not everyone's going to say yes, but a lot of people will, right? Because most professional people like to give back. They like students. If you can find someone who's in the sports industry that's an alma mater, either of your high school or your community college or the college in the neighborhood, you can use that, right, as the specific detail to help connect the two of you. But the story is in who you are, what your relationship is to sports, and how it could benefit them by giving you a brief amount of their time. Maybe you're not an athlete. Maybe you had a bond with sports with someone in your family, and maybe that person is no longer alive or no longer lives close by. And you could talk about how much you loved watching sports with your uncle, but your uncle is no longer here, but you really want to continue that tradition by working in the industry when you graduate. Would you be willing to give me 10 minutes of your time? Right? So again, it's still that persuasive strategy. It's still the identifiable characters. It's still the authentic emotion of missing someone and wanting to continue their legacy. Again, it might be that specific detail of a school that you have in common or a sport that you have in common that you shape up into your story, and you ask, hey, this is what I would like for you to do. I've created my invisible fence. I've organized the experience. I've interpreted my reality. I've let you know who I am and what I want. Now I'm asking you to make a decision about giving me some of your time. It's up to you to decide if you are going to do that. And if they do, and you ask for 10 minutes, keep it at 10 minutes. At 10 minutes, you say, thanks so much for your time, and you log off. Got to be respectful of people's time. They'll be more inclined to talk to you again if you do that, if you are really respectful of their time. And then maybe you use that strategy, learn things from different people in the sports industry until you decide what aspect you want to be in and what you want to do next. Anything else? When putting together an estimate proposal for a modeling service, what can I do to have a better shot at being selected? Differentiating yourself from other remodeling services. Basically, what's your explosion and the new normal when people choose you? Because sometimes people will pay a little bit more if they're getting the value out of that money, right? So if you know that you can't cut costs any more than what they are because of the market and how much it costs you to get your supplies and labor, then you've got to convince people that you are worth their while. They should choose you over someone else. And so maybe that has to do with your identity, with your embodiment. Maybe that has to do with how you deliver services. Maybe it has to do with your customer service. I know that most people, when they're remodeling, they complain about how much time it takes, right? It always takes longer than the initial quote suggested it was going to take. Well, what procedures have you set in place to make sure that doesn't happen, which probably not possible, but happens less than other people? Or do you guarantee some sort of money back, some sort of discount if you go over the quoted time? If you have X number of customers that have been happy because of the way you run your business and your customer service, then talk about those characters in a story when you have initial conversations. You could say, you know what? Jacqueline hired us for remodeling services last year, and she had the same concern that you had. Like, are we going to be able to finish in the date that we finished? And she was thrilled to learn that we were only 1 day over time, or to learn that we came in under our estimate. And Jacqueline is not the only one. Everyone that we work with is satisfied in our turnaround time. And I know a lot of my competitors can't say that, right? It's an opportunity for you to turn that into story. Also, invisible fencing might work for you. And you might say something like, you know what? There are 20 things you can worry about when you're remodeling your house, but the only things that matter are these 3. And you talk about those 3 core things, and you talk about how you address them. You've created a fence around those additional issues. Your audience is more inclined to be like, oh, yeah, those 3 things are important. Oh, I do like the way they're solving them. Like, maybe this is the team that I want to work with. So again, another big question, but those would be my suggestions. And if you're just putting together estimates without some interaction, then it's probably going to be difficult. So I would encourage you to like get on the phone as much as possible, Zoom with people as much as possible, especially if you like your interpersonal presence, your virtual presence, meet in person so you can tell the people these stories. If you wrote it all in an email, they might read it, they might not read it. People are all about the too long, didn't read. If you can talk to people, that will probably help. It's in person. Excellent. Then you'll be in good shape. Just practice, right? Get someone on your team in the business, get someone in your family to listen to you tell these stories about satisfied customers, and I think you'll be on your way to having a better shot. As long as you're emphasizing why they're the satisfied customers. And the authentic emotions and the specific details makes it real. Okay, well, Dr. Galvez, I think it's time, and I hand it over to you, but I'll hang out for just a few more minutes on mute here in case there.
Thank you, Dr. Utley, for your time. And